thoughts. There we go. So good evening, everybody. Welcome again to a session of the God of the Father. This is again an open forum. This kind of any question you have, you can ask, and I'll answer to the best of my ability. If I don't know, hopefully you'll find the answer and get back to you when I do, or if I do, or at least give you the direction I went, so you can maybe do it on your own. So yeah, open up to any questions anyone might have.
You go. I was here last week.
It was a good conversation last week. Like I said, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Yeah.
Your shower's Catholic, so it's
Oh.
not just steaming everything out there.
Okay.
They will be back tomorrow morning to finish up everything. There's a valve that's apparently 70 years old that we have to replace.
Okay. Yeah. Just so everyone knows, we're online. Just so everyone knows, my shower had some problems this weekend, so we're getting that trying fixed. So thank you, Todd. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, Sam, what's up?
Well, I've been saving up questions,
Beautiful.
as I like to do.
Wonderful.
So, first one. Is everything that we know Jesus to have said in the Bible, or are there phrases attributed to Jesus that are not in the Bible?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to answer that question, we go to the Bible. So at the end of the Gospel of John, which was the last gospel written, right? So all the gospels written, Matthew, Mark, Luke, probably there's debate whether Mark was first or Matthew was first. I tend to think Matthew was first, but there's reason to say that Mark would have been first. Who really cares? Luke then wrote after them because he was a disciple of Paul, and so he was getting his information kind of firsthand from Paul, but also based on what he wrote, he probably would have talked to the Blessed Mother and other disciples to get information. John, who was an apostle of Jesus, was the last one to write his Gospels. And he kind of ends his Gospel saying there were many more things written or said that by Jesus that are not in this book, because if we wrote it all down, it would take volumes of books to actually do all these things. So that's one of the reasons why we as Catholics also look at tradition as a tenet, a tenet of the faith, right? And not sola scriptura, because as John puts it, there were other things Jesus said that we just don't have written down, and we're handing those on more verbally, right? And so these traditions and these rituals, even the ritual of the Mass, you're not going to find in the Bible how the Mass is celebrated, except that we have the words of Jesus' Last Supper. But we don't know really from the Bible how synagogue worship even worked. If you look at how what happens in the synagogue, well, he cures people and he does all this amazing stuff, but okay, what happens? What happens in the synagogue? That's not in the Bible, right? So obviously there are things that Jesus did and said that are not recorded in at least the Gospels, we would say. There are other acts of Jesus that are recorded in, let's say, the Acts of the Apostles, like the appearance to Saul, who became Paul, right? These other things, they're actually the highest tradition of the church that's not recorded in any scripture, that after the ascension of Jesus, Peter was fleeing Rome because the persecution's coming, right? And as he was going along his way outside of Rome, Jesus is coming the other way. And Peter says, Domine, quo vadis? Where are you going? And he responds, well, I'm going to sacrifice myself again for my people. Right? And that prompts Peter to turn around. Okay. He goes back to Rome. Now, did that happen? I don't know, but apparently it was handed down by Peter himself.
So that's like an actual phrase that Jesus said that is held to be true, but is not in the Bible.
Well, so that's the thing. We have to understand there's difference. We say that something that is biblically true. Every word we say is in the Bible is true, we would say, right? Everything. There are pious traditions and practices that we would say would be very true. But there are also pious practices and traditions that may not necessarily be factual, but we would still say are true.
Like they're true in a poetic general sense?
Or maybe like a legendary or like a literary sense, right? So it's like the tradition that when Paul was beheaded, right? That the way the tradition goes is Paul's head bounced 3 times, and from those bounces, there were these springs that popped up that we have in Rome today. Now, did that happen? I don't know. It's a beautiful thing to say, and it shows the nature of not only Paul's sacrificial death to follow Jesus, but also the holiness of Paul. But is it true? Is it actually factual? I don't. And you have to understand too, a lot of times in the Middle Ages, and even in the medieval times, right? A lot of these things were done, like you say, poetically. They were kind of put out there poetically to kind of tell a story. And there's been a movement to go back to what we call the hagiography of many saints and lives of people, and maybe try to bring them more in line with modern understanding, right? So what does that mean? Okay, well, there's a tradition like Saint Christopher, for instance. So Saint
I'm
Christopher,
still on board with him.
yeah, sure, okay,
And Pluto.
and you can. So Saint Christopher, the pious tradition with Saint Christopher, he was a gigantic man, and it was said that he actually helped ferry the infant Jesus across a river, and because of that, he's the patron saint of travelers. Okay, was there? Mickey have something to say? Mickey? Oh, we're trying to say something. What? Otherwise, we'll go ahead. You're muted right now. Okay, never mind. So Saint Christopher. So he was kind of known to be this gigantic person. And was there Saint Christopher? Well, maybe. And maybe there was something of Saint Christopher's life that was sort of analogous to this kind of aspect of the legend of Saint Christopher. But was it true that he actually buried the infant Jesus across a huge river just by walking? I don't know.
Well, the stories of a lot of the saints, I'm thinking of Saint Christina, who gave away her father's money and he put her in a furnace for 10 days. No, seriously.
I mean, because she was, an actual fiery furnace.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
hey,
she
well,
came out of it.
biblically speaking, we had that happen before, right? I mean, the brothers of Daniel, that happened.
Yes.
Sure. I don't know. But again, so to kind of drive more home, like, so for instance, the legend of Saint George. So Saint George was the legend. He killed the last dragon in all of England.
And they took away a big giant orange church from him.
Well, sure. Well, yeah, that happened a little
I
later.
mean, that was right.
but you're talking about the Reformation, yeah.
No, I'm talking about St. George's
Right.
on Greffel.
Oh, well, so there's still St. George. But it's St. George at the parish of John Paul II. Okay, but to
Maybe a name change.
right. Yeah. So the legend is that he did. Now the truth is, and what he did was he evangelized all England, and so in that respect, he did drive out the serpent, the devil, from England. And so here is a kind of a literary poetic way that's being described.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we have a lot of that with our saints, especially from those ages. And it's not that they did these literal like driving out dragons and ferrying Jesus across, but maybe from St. Christopher, he bore the burdens of maybe the people in his society. And in that he was bearing Jesus.
Well, I told you about this fellow who has a podcast and it was called Capturing Christianity, and I called him Captain Christianity. Well, he would have debates. He would set up debates for his podcast and things. Well, he became Catholic. And so all of the other Protestant podcasts are furious. Well, this weekend, I'm trying to evangelize the heck out of this kid at Panera. And he told me that he blew up Twitter by saying Sola Scriptura is not in the scripture. Well, I don't know if his followers got the joke.
Well, it's not a joke.
No, but I mean,
So yeah, I mean the point of that's one of the arguments when it comes to things
Yeah.
like Sola Scriptura is like, so like there are several things you can, and these are more strong. So we don't want to like get involved in these, but like, yeah, so the argument would go, well, if scripture is the only authority, then that authority has to come from scripture. So it's kind of a circular argument, right? So in other words, to say that the scripture, Sola Scriptura, well, that would have to be somewhere in scripture to say that actually would be the authority. But nowhere in the Bible do you say that this book is the primary authority for all of Christianity.
There's got to be a verse or two that that argument could be founded on, right? Like,
Well, I mean, so
interpret it like this.
because if you read certain writings of St. Paul, right? Because like he talks about what hasn't been written or handed down, you shouldn't take to be believed, right? So, but also but they have to look at it in conjunction. He says written or handed down.
You
Like,
listen.
saying it's
Oh,
Mickey got something?
No, I just don't, my husband asked me what I was doing and I told him I was listening to you talk.
I'm gonna put you on mute. If you want to talk, just take yourself off of mute, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So, so yes, but I mean, it's even like things like, well, okay, nowhere in scripture does it say that Jesus went to the bathroom.
That's true.
Now, if we want to hold scripture to be the authority, well, wouldn't then we have to say that Jesus being a man? I mean, you would imagine, now you could speak there, he was man and God, so, but he still ate and drank, and as a man, that would have to come out somehow.
I don't even know if it says King David went to the bathroom.
Well,
Well, it said he was leaving himself in a cave.
Okay. We can find some other.
But yeah, this is what I'm saying, though. We have to look at that kind of like, we have to look at the Bible also rationally, right? And so we have to understand, like, even that comes into play, especially when we talk about, okay, was Jesus talking figuratively, like in a parable, or is he talking literally here? And we can discuss that and debate that and come with different interpretation, that's fine. But ultimately, there has to be a authority that would have to make the call.
Mhm.
And we in the Catholic Church said, yeah, we got that. We have a teaching office that was given to us directly by Jesus called the Magisterium, whose job is to do that.
well, I might have mentioned this. There's another podcast, and this other guy got these two fellows together. One is a young man who calls himself the other Paul.
Oh my.
Yeah, isn't that fun? And he's really young, but pretty well versed in a lot of things. Well, he's debating Jimmy Akin. Do you know who he is?
The name's familiar, but I
He's
don't know.
extremely
He's a
knowledgeable.
Catholic apologist. He works on Catholic Answers.
Still alive now.
Oh, yeah. He's still
Yeah, you'd recognize. He looks like somebody from Duck Dynasty.
Oh, okay. Is he American?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
He's also
So-
a convert. He came from another,
they are arguing, the other Paul is saying, the magisterium, Jesus might have set up the magisterium, but he didn't say it was gonna carry on. And so Jimmy says, well, he didn't say, now we're gonna have an end to the magisterium at this point. So they just kept going back and forth. Around the same
And
circle.
I think to break that circle, the question has to be asked at some point, though. Okay, well, why would Jesus initially establish this and then just kind of abolish it? Or why would you think to be not a need for that over time?
Yeah, when he was leaving and the
Yeah.
apostles would die.
Well, wouldn't the answer be at the time of the second coming, the magisterium is not needed anymore?
Well, I think we would agree with that too, but the second coming hasn't happened yet.
So continue.
Sure.
Yeah,
So, I think that's what the argument comes
Army
down
and
to,
Jimmy
though.
kept saying,
Because if
but
we're saying that, so if the argument is that Jesus may initially set it up, but then it was no longer necessary, so it just became either irrelevant or maybe it was abolished. Well, there would have to be a point where that actually happened. And that would have to come from Jesus, because man couldn't just do that on their own.
and the apostles, there weren't just the apostles, there were the disciples who were sent out.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Acts of the Apostles, it's very clear that the apostles didn't just stay as this only bishops of the church. They made
Yeah.
other bishops and other priests and other deacons.
Yeah,
And they were given that authority to do that. So even the scripture says, well, this is how it was set up. Okay, then why would we not keep that going even in our time today?
and if you believe in sola scriptura, Jesus would have said, now do that for a couple hundred
Right,
years,
exactly.
then think
Right.
something better,
Right, yeah.
like Protestants.
Right. So yeah, I think so, to bring kind of full circle, yeah, so we obviously hold everything in scripture to be true. But are there things that were not in scripture that we would hold to be true as well? Of course there would be.
I was thinking like, is there a letter whose like truth is generally believed, but just didn't happen to make it in the Bible? And like
Oh, sure.
in the letter,
Oh, sure.
it has like something that Jesus said.
Yeah. You mean directly from Jesus or something handed
Yeah,
down?
like his words.
So we don't have much of that after the ascension, because after he appeared to Saul, that was kind of it, right? I mean, again, even that vision of Peter, that actually happened or not, well, it's not written in scripture anywhere. Where Saul's account was, did it? Maybe. I mean, Paul even actually Peter wrote letters and stuff too that we still have today. And some of his made in the Bible, right? What we do have though is certain letters from early church fathers. Like, for instance, Ignatius of Antioch, who was the second bishop of Antioch, who followed St. Peter. St. Peter made him the bishop of Antioch. He wrote letters in the same vein as St. Paul to these other places in the ancient world, like Corinth and Colossae, and all these places that Paul also wrote his letters, and kind of also revealing and talking about even how the Mass is celebrated. Mm-hmm. What the Eucharist is, right? And using scriptural references before the Bible actually was solidified to do that. So all the church fathers up until Nicaea, there is some innovation in some ways, but they're based on those biblical truths and those traditions handed down that were developed. And I think we see that also primarily where, oh man, what did I put on the spot? Who was the wasn't actually Antioch. There was a church father who was very skilled in philosophy, and he kind of brought in Greek philosophy to kind of highlight and even not elevate, but highlight and understand the teaching of Jesus in a further light. And I'm trying,
like Saint Jerome or
Origen. Origen is not a recognized saint for the Catholic Church. And there's a reason for Origen, but Origen stuff is good. He had a really good a good foundational theological basis. The problem with him is he, at the end of his life, he turned what they call Montanist. And so he took a very aesthetical approach to Christianity and saying that this is the only way you can go. So unless you gave up all you had, went into the desert, and just lived as a hermit for the rest of your life, you can't find salvation. Which the church were like, no, yeah, that's not right. So he all the stuff up to that point was very, very good. But he ended his life in sort of, it wasn't necessarily heresy because it wasn't declared a heresy yet. But it was like, that's not true, right?
What was that called again?
Montanism. Right. So in other words, you go to the mountain.
Oh.
Right.
Like
you have to live in the mountain as a hermit to get salvation. Oh man, he's great. He's a very famous
Begins with an I.
Not Ignatius.
No.
Irenaeus.
Irenaeus, that doesn't begin with
Is
an
it a
I.
word name?
No, it's something with something.
Like Saint John Chrysostom.
No. If you say the name of it, oh, that's the guy. But it's like, oh no. He's called the philosopher. And anyway, he's also like 3rd century saint that really was able to bring this understanding, and also was a way for it to actually bring it to like, educated people. So like, if you look at Christianity, it was really a movement of the poor, a movement of kind of the outcasts. Mm-hmm. And there were Levites and priests that and Pharisees, but when it got to like more the Roman and Greek world, it was kind of being done through like kind of the service industry, right? So like through slaves and through like kind of the plebs of society. And this thing actually kind of brought into the light for the upper class people to actually see the reason behind it. And I'll get his name. I'm sure I'll as soon as I get it, I'll put it on the description. Oh, by the way, it was this. But yeah, so we understand that there's these things that they were kind of understood and handed down that weren't necessarily in scripture. Now, did it come directly from Jesus? That's a good question. They came from the apostles, and the apostles were taught these things directly from Jesus. And so I think we could say with good certainty that the teaching of these apostles would have been Jesus' teaching. And ultimately, you use your reason, your faculty of reason to determine that, because if it's good, it's of God, and if it's not, well, it's not. And everything the apostles taught was good. It was in line with reason and truth and charity. And so for that reason, we would say, well, it's obviously of God, even if Jesus didn't say directly, it definitely would be something that we should uphold. But also even the apostles and even one of the saints after them, you know, one of the reasons that it's actually it would be a good thing for a Jewish person to recognize Jesus is because one thing that the law dictated for Jewish people was that a prophet had to show what they were saying by signs. And every time they had talked, Jesus says something else, well, show a sign for it, right? He said the Bible all the time. And he did. Because he's God. He's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying is the truth. What's interesting though is the apostles did the same thing. When they would say something, they would say, well, hey, show us by a sign. Okay. Boom, done, right? And even the early church fathers would do the same too, but even offering their lives for it. And so the best argument for Christianity would be, if it weren't true, how come some people would lay down their life for it?
Well, and how could a prophet declare himself God if he was a real prophet? Which
And or if
they
you
don't know that he
did,
was.
you'd have to back it up.
Yeah.
And Jesus was the only one that actually did. Right. I mean, so a prophet come along and say, I am the Messiah and I am the Son of God. Okay, but the people's logical and fair response to, okay, well, show me. Give me a sign. Oh, no, you're supposed to believe me. Well, okay, but you know, Moses gave a sign, Abraham gave a sign. I mean, so if you truly are, if you're claiming the Son of God, which is greater than Abraham and Moses, you better show us that you're actually telling us the truth. Because this isn't just my life, this is my immortal soul. So I'm not going to just follow you because you say so. Well, Jesus, okay, well, here, hey, cripple, get walk, right? You can eat some bread here. You know, so I think we have to be very clear about that.
What else you got?
I have more.
Go for it. Yeah, whatever.
Okay,
What's your name, by the way?
Chris,
Chris, I'm Sam.
nice to meet
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you.
Have you ever heard of, I'm sure you have, the golden chain?
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
Do you have that?
I do actually. I have it. If you see on my, I have this little like software here called Variable. I use this primarily for homily prep. And the nice thing about Verbum is that it not only gives like good commentaries, but also goes into the scripture in both Latin and Greek. So you can see like the word phrasing, the meaning, and where the English word comes from. Because oftentimes, you know, translation betrays meaning. So it's always good to look at the original word to see what the actual meaning was in that original word. And that verb is very helpful in that. And it does have the Golden Chain is actually a series of comments by the church fathers and other saints that was put together by St. Thomas Aquinas. It was done for each of the Gospels. And so it's helpful because it goes passage by passage and then breaks it down, and then it says what some of the church fathers would say about it. So I use it quite often. I always say
And it's like 3,000.
oh, it's huge, it's huge volume. Yeah, I mean, so like for instance here, if you know, I'll pull it up.
So what do you search for keywords or?
Yeah, so what
go
you
to that
do,
particular gospel?
you can see, I'm gonna see my screen, I think, so hopefully this will be good.
So you take the day's readings and then you can just go to that section.
Right.
See what all these geniuses said.
Or you could check out Bishop Robert Barron. He publishes
Oh.
the day before.
I also have, well, yeah, but that's a little.
You don't find a little
that's
plagiarism.
That's a little too late to write your homily. That's the only problem with him. I also like Dr. Grant Petrie. He has a lot of good information. So here you can see, like here, is this? Here, I should be. Yeah, Catena Aura, which is the Latin for a golden chain.
Okay.
So yeah, Matthew. So like yeah, for instance, you put like the passage in here, it'll come up, and then it will tell you, it'll break down like certain passages. Where is it at here? Here it is. Like 3:7 through 10, and say what it is, and then I'll do the different, like, so Gregory the Great, or Isidore Seville, or Pseudo Chrysostom, which is sort of attributed to a different Chrysostom. So I mean, they say what all these church fathers said about these particular passages.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Augustine. I mean, so it goes through like these certain does that for every passage in the gospel. So I find it helpful, especially if I'm stuck. To go back, well,
Totally.
someone else asked this question before, so they must know the answer, and so you go back and find it, right? So I use this all the time, though.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And I mean, so it does cost for the software, just FYI.
Yeah.
So,
But it's worth it for me, that's for sure.
all three of you write different homilies for each Sunday?
I would hope. I mean, yeah, do we have to use each other's? No.
You don't say, so one thing I like about listening to the homily, and then I read reflections by Bishop Barron, is it seems to me that every line in the Bible you can come at from 4 or
for
5
sure.
different
For sure.
ways. Yeah, and so you get all the homily you can enjoy.
Yeah, yeah, and so like my deacon assignment in Wentzville, that was I was a deacon when the liturgical cycle came to year B. So year B, as we all know, is from St. Mark, and because St. Mark is so short, they kind of fill in with the Bread of Life discourse from John chapter 6. And so every 3 years you're getting the same this John chapter 6 reading, and it's broken up over like a 5-week period. So the struggle would be, okay, I know John 6 coming up for about a month and a half in like August, September. How many different ways can I break this down to talk about the Eucharist, right? And so it's very helpful sometimes. Some houses will get together and say, let's just come up with a theme for a different weekend. So I'll talk about the same theme in a different, write our own homilies, but use it as a guide what we're going to write about. So maybe we talk about the spiritual aspect of the Eucharist. Maybe we talk about the revelation of Jesus as being God as walking on the water. Or maybe we talk about, what the symbolism of the 5,000, feeding of the 5,000, how the Eucharistic, approaches that, how that sets up for everything else. So it's good to have that sometimes in certain houses. Now we haven't done that here. Part of that, so there's a benefit and there's also a deficit. So the benefit of having themes, everyone's on the same page, and helps the preacher kind of come up with that theme on the same weekend. The con against that is kind of stifles the creativity of the writer, right? So because if we're looking at this from a perspective of how do we prepare a homily, my first step is I pray with the scripture. And so I let the Holy Spirit kind of guide me as far as what he wants to say. And by doing a theme, you're kind of like saying, well, the Holy Spirit, that's nice.
Yeah.
But let's focus on this.
And if you have a great idea, you've got to wait 3 years for it to come up.
Right, yeah. So it's good and it's bad, right?
Yeah.
There's pros and cons. I think that just depends on the guys in the house too, like what you want to do, right? So I've seen it both ways, and I've seen it work both ways. So either way, it's going to work. But these are very helpful tools to help with those things, though, too, right?
Oh,
Yeah. So
you've gone through at this point multiple 3-year cycles.
this is I'm doing my second one now as a preacher. So I was ordained in cycle B. Is that right? No, wait. Hold on.
You started
I know, but let's see here. Okay.
look, you have a folder.
Oh yeah, I have the year like that, right? So okay, I was ordained in 2018, 2019. So that would have been year B into year C, 2019, 2020, C into A. So yeah, this is going on now. This is my second cycle around. Yeah.
And so I'm sure you revisit, or maybe you don't, maybe you completely start from scratch. I don't know.
So what I do is I do go back to my old homilies, but I do that to make sure I don't talk about the same thing.
Okay, so you do try to change it.
I do, just because I don't think I'm far enough in my priesthood to kind of like way back in my laurels in some ways. So in other words, I don't take anyone for like using old homilies. I think that's good sometimes, especially like for instance, like Monsignor Simon or Monsignor Schemmelfer. They have a wealth of experience.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing about that is they've had multiple parishes they've been to. And so I would not fault them for saying, you know what, I haven't used this homily yet in this parish. I'm gonna use it. That saves you time, saves you energy. I'm good. I'm not there yet, right?
Well, and this gives you more opportunity to go at it.
It does.
Same one in
But
different.
I also know that, I
aspects.
also in the same respect that I know that Monsignor Schemmelfer and Monsignor Simon also write new ones too,
Mhm.
because I think part of that too is you want to keep the habit up, right? I mean, the practice of
Oh,
it is
yeah.
just good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if that's one thing I do appreciate about having the deacons preaches on certain weekends, because it's nice to have a break. But you also, it's not enough time where you like lose that habit of doing it.
And he's very good.
Oh, he is. So yeah, we're very fortunate to have a deacon here that can actually preach well. So I think, yeah, part of it is just keeping the habit, but also I don't have enough to go back and say, oh, I'm gonna do this one again, because like, I have my first year stuff that I haven't used here, but also it's like, that's kind of a cop out.
Yeah.
I kind of want to keep that habit and keep that going. Maybe 10 years from now, it might be a different story. And I wouldn't necessarily advocate using the same homily at the same parish, right? Because that can get people to notice that.
Well, you can also target it a little bit to what's going on
Sure
in
you
the
could.
world.
Sure you
you
could,
know.
right, yeah. And I mean, mostly if you see people that write them, like that's one of the reasons why I use bullet points. Because then you can go back and say, okay, this was what was going on then. I can apply something different now that's in the, more timely. Because, think about it, then that's kind of goes with what the scripture tells us, that everything in scripture, there's nothing new under the sun, and it applies in our life no matter what's happening. You can apply these lessons we learn in the sacred scripture to whatever time we're going through, whatever thing we're going through, whether it be joyous or whether it be tragic, whether it be sad, whether it be happy. It's timeless, it's timeless, right? So that's what really we find in scripture. Some are more difficult than others. I mean, even this last weekend, we were talking about St. John the Baptist for 4 weeks up in Advent. Now it's like, okay, John the Baptist comes up again. Okay, great, awesome. So it can be a challenge, but it's a good challenge to have. Right? And part of that is it always starts with prayer. And I always take the tact of I'm gonna let the Holy Spirit work. And if people love it, that's the Holy Spirit. If people hate it, well, I must have failed in the way I listen to the Holy Spirit. Right? That's kind of how it comes down to. So yeah, so good.
Well, that's wise.
I think so. I hope so. Yeah. Good.
Another one, sure.
Yeah,
I just have a note that I just keep adding to.
All good.
I do too. I've got a notebook.
All good.
Oh, here's one. So a public intellectual, I guess you call it, I think it has a lot of good things to say, is a guy named Jordan Peterson.
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah. Oh, he's a wealth of good stuff. But he said something interesting. He said he looked at various translations of the meek will inherit the earth. And he concluded that the better translation would be to have said, people who have swords and know how to use them, but keep them sheathed will inherit the earth. I want to know if you.
I don't know what translation that would be. So like I said, for me, the best thing to do is always go back to the original Greek, right? So probably best to do that here. So that would be Matthew 5. Hold on. Is it going in Greek? Well, it sure is. Huh. Oh, it's in Greek. All right. Yeah, I can do this a little different here. Okay, I gotta change that. I'll put it in default. Is there another one there? Yeah, okay. Type in meek. Okay, Hebrew word topic, Greek words. Let's see if I can roll it up a little bit. That's the other thing I like this too, because you kind of look at those words and say, okay, what are you actually, what is actually going on here? Protest, meekness. Let's see, what's the American Standard Version? All right, Psalm, First Timothy, Matthew 11, Matthew 5:5, right? So if we go to Matthew 5:5, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. So, when they talk about meek here, okay. Well, let's go back to that guide. So I don't know if they have probably want to look at the translation. Let's see if we can pull that up here. Okay, so the actual word they're using is praus, right? So I don't know, I mean, that really is kind of, it looks like a direct translation. So I don't know, when you talk about swords being sheathed or whatever, I mean, there might be a deeper meaning behind that was translated in some other version. But it looks like the word they're using in this respect would be praus, which is the Greek word for meekness.
So,
Well, maybe, could it be that by meek, he means they're not out?
I mean,
War.
so I think how do we find meekness? That's I think the question, right? So if meekness is not a doormat, I think we have to be very clear about that. And the church teaches that. That doesn't mean just roll over whenever there's conflict. So I think in some ways, but the way that Dr. Peterson seems like he's approaching that could be conflated with mercy.
Mhm.
And there's a difference in that. So mercy is, I have the authority to forgive you or not. I have the authority to unsheath my sword, but I'm not going to.
yeah,
Right? I think, properly speaking, that's mercy. Meekness, there may be some relationship to that, but meekness, I think, if you want to get very technical, that is being humble in the presence of a greater authority.
yes.
So it's more of perspective, right? In other words, mercy is, I have the authority to take my sword out and destroy you. Meekness is a recognition of that and humbling oneself in that respect,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So there's definitely a relationship, but I think it's a relationship in perspective rather than actual potentiality or action, right? So meekness is the one that is experiencing the mercy, while the merciful is the one that actually has the authority to give it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, that's at least how I'd probably respond to that.
Mhm.
Without knowing what translation he's looking at them either, I don't know.
I think he said he was looking at as many as he could get his hands on and trying to form a.
And that's one of the problems with these different editing, that's why we have these different versions, there's different editing perspectives and approaches, right? I mean, because really, are you losing the meaning by saying that blessed are the merciful? Well, or the meek, meaning someone who can pull out their short from their shoe, they don't. Well, no, not really, but God, in that same passage though, he says, blessed are the merciful. So what's the difference?
Oh,
I guess,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So this is a Sermon on the Mount, right? So he says again, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Oh, okay. Well, then how am I being meek?
Well, unless could meek possibly mean, not being warlike.
Well, but also he says, blessed are the peacemakers.
There you go. Pretty much big theme.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what we have to understand is that what the Beatitudes are directed towards is towards charity, right? The whole idea is that you're directed towards the love that God has for each and every one of us. We should be reflecting that love in our actions, our interactions with each other,
Mhm.
right? So in other words, being meek is not wrong if it's in the right context and approach, right? So in other words, if Archbishop Rosansky's here, my response to him should be meekness. If you want to take the spot, Your Excellency, you're more than please. You're my spiritual father. I want to learn from you, right? That's an internal disposition towards him. But if he's coming out with a baseball bat, well, it would be, meekness may not apply in that respect, right? I make
You're
sure
not
from,
that bad.
I might sure from meekness to a peacemaker, that's like what I do, people that talk about this, right? Let's, so then I have to understand the Beatitudes, it's all like, yeah. And that's one thing I think what happens with a lot of Protestant brothers and sisters. They tend to maybe get, and Catholics do this too, so I'm not saying it's everyone, but we can get so in the weeds sometimes when it comes to a particular teaching, particular word use, particular whatever, that we tend to direct our attention more on that than the big picture what's actually trying to be said. And so there is a both and there. The details are important, don't get me wrong, and it's important to know the difference between meekness and mercy, granted. But we have to look at the context of what is Jesus trying to tell us in this whole thing here, right?
So why, I mean, you explained that Latin is the mother language of the church.
Right,
And then we go back to the Greek.
correct.
Well, I came across an article on the Lord's Prayer,
Mhm.
which was given by Jesus.
Yep.
And the foremost expert in Aramaic didn't come up with much of what we came up with. I can
Okay.
send it to you if you like.
Well, I guess my question would first be, I would defer to the Chaldean rite.
All right,
Catholic
got me
Church.
on that.
So the Chaldean rite of the Catholic Church, and I don't, this came up at some point, maybe not in these sessions, but I know we talked about this before in something else. The Chaldean rite of the Catholic Church actually pray the divine liturgy in Aramaic, the original language of Jesus. They are primarily centered in, at that time, Persia, also in Palestine. So this is a rite within the churches. They are Catholic. They're under the jurisdiction of the Holy Catholic Church. They have a rite that is based on their tradition, and that is also any Catholic could go and receive the sacraments, and because they are Catholic, they're all in union with Rome. So I would defer to whatever they do. Right now, the big question though is, like I say, we have to understand that Jesus' words in Aramaic were translated into Greek, then into Latin, and then into English and French and Spanish. So, are the meanings the same? I don't know. I don't know Aramaic enough to say that for sure.
I'll send it to you.
I have a good understanding. Well, I don't know if that'll help me. That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
Well,
I know
this-
the Greek. I have a pretty good understanding of the Greek.
Well, this is the acknowledged expert in an ancient
By
language.
whom? See, that's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, well,
The question.
not like Protestant.
This thing, I always kind of ask that question because we have to understand too, what authority the church has. And I had this conversation earlier with some people, and this kind of goes into, I know a lot of my brother priests who are very upset when the Holy Father kind of restricted the use of the extraordinary form. And I'd say I understand their frustration, I understand what they're saying. But the other side, we have to recognize, and this is true, the Holy Father has that right. He has that ability.
And the next Holy Father could change it, right?
He could, but again, barring that, this is what the Holy Father does. He has that right. And so when we talk about these things, we have to understand, okay, on whose authority are we talking about? Do I believe that the Holy Father, when he is speaking as the Pope and putting things out there as the Holy Father, that he's doing this in union with the Holy Spirit? Yeah. Is there a reason why? I'm sure there is. And do I have a right to know it? I sure do.
Page 3.
Well, give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second. So yeah, I mean, sure. Do I need to know that right now? No. Would it be nice to know? Sure, it would be. Right. So when these things happen, I think some people might kind of shudder at this too. If Pope Francis tomorrow comes out with a bull motu proprio encyclical and calls for the use of Oreos and chocolate milk as the matter of the sacrament of the Eucharist. Okay.
We
Does he
didn't
have
go
the
to high
authority?
school in the sixties.
Right. But without proper authority. That's what I'm saying.
We didn't use Chuck Milk and Oreos, or we'd have a lot more first graders at communion, but there were some casual masses where a loaf of bread was passed around, which now that I see all the crumbs we
Yeah, right, yes,
I
yeah,
wonder.
yeah. And so to that point, I mean, again, it's like, okay, what authority does the church actually have? A lot.
Mhm.
A lot. And so we have to be conscious of that. Now, the Holy Father is not going to do that. He should have a good reason to do that. And we can question the reason. We can do that.
Oh,
Why? Why are we doing that? Why are we doing this? Right? We may not get an answer we actually think is sufficient. But it comes down to like, well, I trust the Holy Spirit's guiding this in some way. So okay.
Well, I came across something that by Bishop Barron
Mhm.
that kind of answered another question I'm still gonna ask, but he said, when I was, I guess, ordained, I put my hands
Mhm.
between the hands of my bishop and I promised obedience.
Yes.
Okay, what about all of those bishops who are in the family of Cardinal Vigano and
Pagano. Yeah.
Vigano and
Yeah.
our own Cardinal Raymond Burke?
What about them?
I think they're pretty much, at least Vigano
Mhm.
is pretty much on the in the vanguard of calling Pope Francis a heretic.
You can call him a heretic only once.
But I mean,
But the
isn't
question,
he
the question,
required?
well, here's the question. Is he calling him a formal heretic or material heretic?
Everything he does, he gets together with that.
Well,
What's that?
So here's the thing. Are you saying, or if you're saying, and maybe clarify this for me. If you're saying that based on what Archbishop Vigano and even Cardinal Burke, I haven't really heard much from Cardinal Burke as far as that's concerned, but okay. If you're saying that they should be excommunicated for what they're
No.
saying, okay. Okay, good. So that's the case, great. If you're saying they should be sanctioned or reprimanded in some way for what they're saying about the Pope. Okay. Maybe.
Well, no, I'm not even saying that. I'm saying that there's been a break in the obedience chain.
No, okay, let's clarify then. What do we mean by obedience? What is obedience?
I have a question on that in that
Okay,
regard.
very good, great, okay. Sam, what do you think? Well, what do you love saying? Well, yes, the person. What do you think obedience is?
Well, pretty much doing, well, here's my question.
Mhm.
When the Archbishop put the letter in the bulletin
Mhm.
telling people not to vote for the marijuana issue bill,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it was signed by all the bishops,
Mhm.
did he just have their names stamped on there, or did they have a choice of signing it?
Well, of course, I have a choice to sign it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a bishop. Okay, let's put it this way. A bishop has full autonomy within their diocese. So what that would mean is, let's say, and this is a great example, maybe. Ascension Thursday,
Oh,
40 days after the resurrection, right? That's biblical. That's what's in there. 20 years ago, it was thought a pastoral remittance of burden, for whatever reason, to change that from Holy Day of Obligation on Thursday to the following Sunday in Easter, right? Archbishop at the time, Archbishop Regali said sure. Other bishops around the United States said sure. Some bishops in the United States said no, we're gonna keep where it is. So right now, let's say if Bishop Rice down in Springfield, even though he's a suffragine guy, meaning he's under some jurisdiction of Archbishop Rosansky, being his suffrage diocese, Archdiocese of St. Louis, If he decides to have Ascension Thursday on Thursday, 4 days after Easter, he can.
Okay.
And Archbishop Rzansky can't say anything about it. If there's a document put out about, from, it's going on in the state of Missouri, and Archbishop Rzansky asked the bishops of Missouri, would you want to sign this? They have the right to, they'd say, no, I don't think that's a great idea. Now, they may want to have a good reason. Maybe they just want to say, well, I don't know if the church is very clear about her teaching on this, so I'm just going to say silent on it. There's a prudence in that.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me, there are a lot of people in prison for decades for having a little stash of sometimes their boyfriends' marijuana. And, rapists don't go to prison for that long, and they're not raising their children.
Yeah.
And so what I was thinking is, did they have to sign it? What if in his younger days, one of the bishops had a prison ministry?
Yeah.
And he knew these people who would be allowed to petition
Yeah, good.
through this bill.
Good. So here's the thing. I think we have to understand that the church in general, and also this is really how even secular authority should work. We should never legislate for exceptional circumstances. Okay. We see this, and this is kind of what we see going on right now in the German Synod, I think. Right? When the German Synod is saying, well, we can bless same-sex unions. When you make a general statement like that we're talking about a legally binding thing, that can be dangerous. Because let's say, for instance, and this is just purely hypothetical, let's say here in the United States, there's a same-sex couple that comes to me to say, Father Madden, we're trying to live a chaste life. We really are, right? We're not living in the same bed. We're not living in the same room. We really kind of are doing this because we have a really great friendship and we do love each other. And we got civilly married. I know that's not what the church says, but we got civilly married so we can actually share benefits, right? Can you bless us in our friendship so we can maintain chastity and maintain the way of life that the church wants for us? Okay, there's nothing wrong with me doing that. But if you make it a legislation saying that now we're just going to bless same-sex couples, ooh, well, boy, now you're saying, okay, I'm not living the church's teaching, but I want you to bless me anyway, and recognize my relationship with this other person as a binding marriage. Well,
I'm older than both of you, and I have several gay friends, and in unions that have been solid for 30 years.
So I'm not being their arguments.
And they've gone through all the terribleness of employment and just everything together. And this is who they are. So they are living the authentic life
Sure.
they were given. Now, what I have a hard time understanding is that when two 20-year-olds come to you in love, that is vocation to marriage. But when the two 40-year-olds,
before we get down this path, though, Chris, let's go back to let's go back to what we're talking about. We were talking about legislating for general rather than particular. Okay?
Yeah,
I think we can understand that, right? So, in other words, when we're talking about these things that like when the bishops say this letter is like, in general, it's probably not a good idea to support this legislation which would legalize marijuana, and the reason is because the church generally takes a stance of moderation when it comes to these type of things, right? The problem with a lot of these circumstances though would be, well, you don't know exactly how that's going to affect you, even in a small dose. We don't really have a lot of understanding about that in general, because everyone has different metabolic rates, everyone has different. So what that would mean is, in general, it's probably a good idea not to make this legal. And we can look at maybe particular instances where there may be exceptions for that. But in general, we're saying you probably shouldn't support this legislation.
But if it's the law, I am what I've been told is glaucoma suspicious.
I don't know what that means, but.
Well,
So-
possibly I'm on my way to
Right,
glaucoma,
so in that respect, you may be an exception to that
But-
particular rule.
but it wouldn't be an exception to the law. And
But,
that
but,
was what
but
it
the
was
law,
about.
but the law was about recreational use. Right.
It was already medical, like you could
Yeah.
have already gotten.
Yeah.
Right.
Medical.
So so the general statement, the issue is you have to look at what the purpose of the law is.
But
And what the teaching is on those things.
the Archbishop, if I read it correctly, his reasoning was, and what's the balance? People getting out of a lifetime in prison, you know, because that was going to be allowed. Well, it is, it passed. But I thought the reasoning was that the tax money that would be generated could be used for medical research. And that could, I think it's right in
That
the
does
letter,
sound- Yeah,
in the explanation, and that could include fetal tissue.
Well, it could be.
Okay, well, in our legislation, I can't talk anymore. They would be controlling what research it funded.
Okay.
And is the church a little disingenuous in being so against the use of fetal tissue when it's been used since the 30s? And at a Catholic hospital, you can get treatment that was developed with the use of fetal tissue, like the polio vaccine.
Okay, so to my understanding, the polio vaccine didn't actually use directly fetal tissue to develop it. Unless there's some information that's different than I.
Yeah, I thought it did.
Well, my understanding is the first use of fetal tissue, especially embryonic tissue, didn't really happen until the 1970s. And even then, what happened there is there's been a multiplication of the cells where even the original cells aren't being used today.
Right.
Well, now, but again, the church would still say we should refrain from using those at all. And so that's always really been the teaching of the church. Now, if you're saying that Catholic hospitals are providing treatments that use those things, well, now we have to look at.
They use them in development.
Who's, I guess the question is, who's making the calls to actually use that as treatment? Who's applying those? What you see happen, practically speaking, is a lot of Catholic hospitals, even though they maintain that their name is Catholic, they're not really living Catholic principles, and neither does the Archbishop nor any of the magisterium sit on the board of those hospitals. So what I'm saying is, the practice may be different from what the church teaches, but how much authority does the church actually have in those practices? I think it has to be looked at, right? So to say that the church is disingenuous, I don't think so.
Well, I'm asking
Mhm.
because, well, what kind of hit me about, if it is true about the polio vaccine, that came out when I was about 4. My best friend who played in our house with me and my 3-year-old sister and my 2-year-old brother came down with polio.
Yeah.
So if the church had said no Catholics can use that vaccine, I guess I wouldn't have grown up Catholic. My parents were not going to take that kind of chance.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think there's a disconnect here. The fact of the matter is, a polio vaccine was manufactured, designed, came about. The church sanctions its use,
Mhm.
and I don't know if the church would sanction it if she knew that it was using fetal tissue to develop it. Which is why I've never seen anything that says that fetal tissues were used.
I thought
in
it was,
particular.
and maybe I'm wrong. I'll have
I don't
to
know.
look
I'd
it
have to
up
do
again.
research on that too,
But-
so I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, so what actually is being done compared to what actually is being communicated could have been different too.
Well, but another thing is, and I think we mentioned this last week, that there is there are embryos and zygotes and fetuses that are lost every day naturally,
Yes,
but the church that I know of isn't encouraging doctors to suggest that be donated like they would the, eyes and heart and everything of a delivered infant.
so I think, again, when we get down into the nitty gritty here. There's a difference in kind between a child that was miscarried, a child that was, for whatever reason, not brought to term,
Mhm.
and a willful killing of the child.
Yeah,
Okay, so I think in one respect, what we're saying is, yeah, because of the formal action of willfully killing the child, that should not be even part of the discussion whatsoever.
no, I didn't
Okay.
mean that.
Okay, all right.
But the Catholic Church should be helping with workarounds that make, just like I said, donating the lost embryo, just like you would donate the organs of a baby.
So
who's born.
there's no restriction of the church saying that if a child were to be lost from miscarriage or whatever, that those remains can be used for research or development.
But should they be encouraging it so there is not a need for aborted tissue?
Well, I think primarily that discussion comes down to use of stem cells, right? And what's been developed, what the church has supported, is actually use of adult stem cells,
Mhm,
which has been found to be even more,
mhm.
actually abundant than using the fetal ones.
Well, and now
So-
they can use your own.
Right, exactly. So I think that has been happening. And maybe it hasn't been as prevalent, but then again, what secular organization do you see promoting the work, the actually good the church does rather than bad?
Well, the church
I think
is
that's-
big enough to promote its own good. Oh,
That's a beautiful comment, Chris. I don't know if that's actually true though.
well, that brings me to my next question.
Okay, so because here's the one point I want to make. Yes, the church does have particular outlets, particular media sources they actually have, right? That's true. And I think those sources actually do a good job of actually promoting certain things that they're going on within the church. But, and it may happen more in other areas than in the United States. I don't think that stuff that's being promoted on like EWTN or on the National Catholic Register or anything else usually comes over into the secular world that you see on like CNN or MSNBC or even Fox News.
Hmm.
I don't think that's naive to say that. So what you see typically on CNN, Fox News, whatever is, oh, this big bad Catholic Church did this wrong. Not look at all this good stuff they are doing. It's like, well, they did this one thing wrong.
Yeah,
And to be fair,
well, then,
sure. I mean, look. I mean, accountability is good. If there's
Yeah.
something wrong with the church,
but it's not just Catholic Church,
it's just religion in general. And I think that's a true. I think that's a fair statement to say. To say that the church can make her own. Okay, but also, are we really in the business of wanting to toot our own horn anyway?
no, but there's so many things. Well, another thing that I'm not gonna get into.
All right. Okay.
But I do have this question.
Okay.
What is the archdiocese doing about capital punishment in Missouri?
Well, I mean, you saw again, the bishops got together this last execution and came out against it. I think that the archdiocese does promote these aspects of pro-life, whether they be from conception to natural death over and over again. And this goes into, I think, the discussion we've just been having. The question is, who's listening?
Well,
And can the archbishop and the archdiocese go into the prison and say, stop this, don't do this?
yeah,
No, they can't.
I think they could. I think
You think they would be able to actually stop it? They could
that
go in there and it's something like a.
they could,
Chris, you realize this is
Dude.
not 1632, right? This is 2023.
I think that the archdiocese, I'd be happy to choreograph it, would make the biggest spectacle. There's gonna be one on the 7th
Mhm.
of February, the 4th one in a
Mhm.
very short time. I think that the Catholic Church could make the biggest spectacle Missouri has ever seen, bigger than when the Pope came,
Mhm.
and continue to do it. And I think that it would be, like I said, a spectacle. And you only need one guy. You only need the governor to commute a sentence.
Mhm.
But also the Catholic Church drives a lot of voters in the pro-life
Could
direction.
have fooled me.
Hmm.
You think that's true? I don't.
Yeah,
Well, if you look at the data, I don't think it is.
come say the rosary with us tomorrow.
Well, Chris, what I'm saying is. Okay, let's look at it this way. When we talk about the authority of the church and the influence of the church. Let's just start singularly. You say that the governor is the only person who has to convince. Okay. How? So you're saying let's
Like
have a
I
rally,
said.
let's have a rally, a bunch of people that are
Oh,
Catholic and promote
no.
pro-life.
No.
What are you saying specifically?
Like drive to the prison.
Well, yeah, well,
It's in Lebanon.
maybe he can bring in some of his news people into his office while he calls the governor,
Who? You talking about the Archbishop bringing?
the Archbishop,
Okay, all right.
while he calls the governor.
Uh-huh,
You have to have a plant, so you know when the governor's near his
uh-huh,
phone.
yeah,
And it says, I wanna have a meeting with you,
great,
okay?
uh-huh.
Now, what kind of vestments can you wear off of the altar? Can you wear all the colored vestments?
You're going for the maximum spectacle.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So-
And enter the Capitol building,
Uh-huh,
proceeding across. Now, I'm talking about all the bishops.
right,
In whatever
uh-huh,
you can wear. And you can get a lot of ex-nuns, because they're always at the prison when the murder happens. And just legions of Catholics. You don't have to do the little girls in communion dresses, but the coup de grace, the Pink Sisters,
mhm.
a busload of Pink Sisters. I'm telling you, if they proceed across the rotunda
But you know, the Pink
and up
Sisters,
those steps,
but Chris, you know, the Pink Sisters can't leave it on.
they did.
What
They
do you
went
do?
to the stadium for the Pope.
Well, that. may
And
be
this
exception-
would be
exception
the
to certain
point.
directions.
This is
Yeah.
so horrendous.
Uh-huh.
This is what the Pink Sisters do. But I'm telling you, as that processional goes up the steps of that Capitol building, people in Mongolia are gonna be looking at that on their phone. So is the Pope.
Because we have the media there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'll be there, he'll be there, we'll be giving out rosary.
Sure, great.
And the Pink Sisters, but if he doesn't capitulate, the governor. Okay, well, we're gonna come back next Tuesday
Mhm.
and have that whole crowd, plus the rabbis and the big ministers of every denomination there. And it still doesn't work, they'll be at the prison, but this is gonna go global. Just because, just shame them into it. And the Archbishop can get on the phone with every Republican legislator who ran on pro-life, and they should be there too.
Sure.
All right, would you set that up?
You think
I think, okay, let's put it this way. I think theoretically, that is a great plan. Theoretically, that is a great plan. Practically speaking, I see some issues. Is that fair?
Well, that's fair,
Okay.
except it has to be extraordinary because this country is execution act,
Sure, yeah, and
especially this state.
yeah, and I think here's the thing, well, I don't think more than text, but yeah, okay, but
Well,
fair.
maybe not.
So let's, I mean, so. I think that's a great, and I think that that's not to say that people haven't been showing up and trying to do these things. And I mean, I know the Archbishop has met with the governor, and I'm sure he had discussions like this with him too. And there's one thing to be said about shaming people, which can be effective, right? I think though, the problem you're running into is I don't see secular media come to the Archbishop with that approach.
I think secular media is going to be anywhere where there's something going on.
Could
It
be,
is newsy.
that may be true, although we've seen instances in the past where that hasn't been the case. And so I think that media, especially secular media, not just secular media, I mean, even Christian Catholic media, they have a narrative. They have a particular idea of how things work. They have a particular idea of how things should work. And anything that's contrary to that narrative, they're not going to pay attention to it. Now, we can all talk about, is that really the purpose of the media? And the answer to that, of course, is no. Right? The media shouldn't have a narrative. It should be objective in what they're saying, objective in what they're reporting. But that, in practice, that doesn't happen.
So most of the media are staffed and peopled by progressive people.
That's probably fair.
So progressives are generally anti-death penalty, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
That seems like a
Oh, yeah.
rare overlap
Yeah,
with what the Christian.
I think it depends though on who the person dying is though too.
Yeah, if it's, yeah, I mean, if it seems like they're defending a monster, and then the victim's family is going, why are you trying to stop this? You know, that could be very bad publicity.
Well, except, you know, a lot of things
Mhm.
the Catholic Church stands for as bad publicity,
Oh, right,
but,
sure.
you know, in the pro-life community, who is on the narrow path? Those innocent,
Yeah, no,
or those that maybe didn't have time
Kristen,
enough?
I mean, I think that's truly fair. I mean, but I also think that you see even pro-life efforts on the other side. Because you make the same argument about the abortion issue, right?
Well, yeah,
But I think even more drastic has been done to the abortion issue, and they've been ignored.
oh,
You know what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is, that's what I'm saying. In theory, I think that's a great idea. But I think in practice, that's gonna fall short. And even if you get the archbishops to get the bishops of the
Keep
other
it up.
St. Louis to go and keep it up and do that, a lot of it is going to depend on who the person being executed is. I really think that's the case, practically speaking. And so
you don't know enough liberals.
maybe not, but I'm just saying, I think when you're looking at this from a perspective of, okay, what can the church do? Well, we can evangelize. How do we do that? Well, we have that relationship with each other and other people and try to spread the message and share that word. And I think that's a way you can do that, sure. That's a little bit different though than, okay, what the other question is, what consequence would come from this? So if you're looking at from a Parsons standpoint, a Governor Parsons standpoint, he is the governor of a conservative state in general, that the majority of people, who maybe not even be Catholic, uphold the death penalty. And so even if you were to get this swell of people that would come that say, let's not do this, it's wrong, here's why this is wrong, and we're gonna defend the death is wrong, and we would. Politically speaking, it really doesn't serve him any benefit. And so what's the consequence? Well, Parsons still gonna have his voting base to get reelected if he so chooses. But the other side of the coin too is, well, the only real maybe sanction the church can give would be excommunication. But if the person's not Catholic, well, we can't do much about that either.
No, I think that, you know, they're exposing themselves as not being so pro-life, just like Spring Court did.
So you're saying the parson would express that is not being pro-life.
Well, all of those that'll be up for election, there's people up for election.
Yeah, true.
And they're gonna have a problem because for 50 years, they've run
Mhm.
on an anti-abortion stance. How many of them do you think showed up with a bill in their pocket?
Granted, and
Never one.
yeah, and so I think there's ways we can look at that too, but I think the problem is most people,
Yeah,
they look at the death penalty and abortion as two
Yeah.
separate issues.
they do, but the
And they
Catholic
vote
Church
that
shouldn't.
and we don't. But to say that, but even that respect, I think you give a little bit too much credit to the Catholic Church for their influence on how voting trends go. Because if that were true, if they were true that the church actually has that authority to influence people to vote in line with their conscience, you would have a lot more Catholics that are voting a particular way against some of these policies, some of these promotions that are actually anti-Catholic. Or what you
Well-
would see is new candidates come about,
But what
actually uphold
is,
Catholic teaching, they be voted for as well.
what is your choice? I mean,
Well-
we don't have to go too.
Yeah, it's I mean,
Word,
you're right,
but-
primarily it's a lesser of two evils, you're right.
McConnell's objective was not was not anti-abortion.
That's right, but I
His
can't,
was conservative court,
but I have no authority to elect Connell if he's not a my senator.
but what, the pro-life,
Mhm,
Supreme Court,
mhm,
I think I wrote you a memo about this.
I don't know.
There was so much hoopla about Dobbs and Roe v. Wade. Nothing was said that same court sent two men back to death row
Yeah,
with proof of innocence in their
Right.
hand.
right,
But I didn't hear, and and right after that was the Pope's intention for the month,
was for the,
was the end
Yeah.
of capital punishment. Well, who he was talking to?
I know,
America,
I know, but that's what I'm saying
and
though.
maybe
That's,
Saudi
but see,
Arabia.
that's what I'm saying though, I think it goes both ways. I think if you had people that were voting in line with church teachings, I think what you would really have is no Catholics voting primarily. Or what you would have is Catholics voting for candidates who uphold all, and there have been candidates out there that have upheld the church's teaching on both those subjects. And yet they're not being voted for,
Not in Missouri.
not anywhere in the United States.
Well, another problem though is that the party that so many people voted for, they're the same one as they're running on the pro-life issue. They defunded the WIC program, you know what that is? Women and infant food,
Mhm, yeah,
nutrition for
yeah.
pregnant women
right,
and infants. And they, what else? Even a pro-life issue, Meals on Wheels
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
pro-life issue,
right, yeah,
not just nutrition,
Yeah.
but mental health.
yes, I'm with you on that, that's wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean.
just down the line,
Right.
and then I'm starting a club.
Okay,
Our Sunday visitor drives me crazy club. The,
it's a newspaper.
Newspaper that's in the-
back of church.
That's
Yeah,
real.
I know.
so they have a thing on euthanasia
Mhm.
and assisted suicide. So, which I'm not arguing for, but they carry on and on about it,
Mm.
and then they use an example, which it could very well be specious or misleading, of a woman who was euthanized because of loneliness.
Mm.
Okay. Did they sneak into her room and euthanize her in the middle of the night because she was lonely? But, okay, this is right here. Right here, it talks about, the pro-life effort. Why weren't those pro-lifers going and visiting those old people in the nursing home?
Who said they weren't? I mean, that's what I'm saying, I don't, because here's the thing, right? I don't know the answer.
And this was not-
And I can't say that they're not. what I'm saying is that we as a church uphold both the dignity and the respect for human life
Yeah.
in all forms. And so, yeah, that's a
But-
valid question. Now, but what the church teaches compared to what the practice is, that's not necessarily the same thing all the time.
But the church. you
Because
know,
we're infallible people, right? We're fallible
Should be.
people.
But another thing it did was, it came out with a lot of articles, which it should,
Mhm.
about we really need to step up
Mhm.
our help for mothers,
Yeah.
pregnant people.
Yeah.
But then it had another article right next to it on how many people the church has lost.
Yeah.
You know, well, people mean contributions, you know,
Yeah.
and
Well, I would say people mean souls, but yeah, okay.
I mean like mass attendance,
no, well,
or people who call themselves.
who come and support the parish.
But see, I think that's my point though, too. Because when you're looking at, okay, the influence of the church as well. It's no secret. Okay, let's look at our parish, for instance, okay? We have over 5,000 people registered in this parish, men, women, and children, right? We have on average about 500 coming to mass on any given Sunday. So, okay, if you want to say we're influential, okay, we're influencing maybe 10% of our people, but that also is a choice that those people are making. That I can't go to their house, why aren't you at mass, come on, follow me, I can't
I
do
think
that.
you should do that.
They did in the olden days.
I think if you're.
So again, does shame work better than offering love? I don't know.
You,
We should call
why,
everyone to register.
Jesus
We have-
did.
Well, now here's the other, now, Sam,
For you to come.
now the interesting thing about that is we have an organization that does that.
Oh,
They're called the Legion of Mary.
they call the phone numbers and say, we'd really love to see you. It's-
They say, hey, you know, we're looking for people to do certain things, you know, or, you know, if you haven't been to mass in a while, we really want you back and like you to have you there. If you need some help, we can help you with that.
You should do it. Just like Jesus pulled that character down out of the sycamore tree.
Mhm.
However, anybody could get up in a sycamore
Mhm.
tree. I mean, they're 2 stories high before you see a branch,
Mhm.
but, you know,
So you're
biblical
so
sycamore tree.
what you're saying is me personally.
You
should call
say,
people.
I'll
Which I
see
do.
you at 11 o'clock mass, and then I'm coming to your house to eat dinner, like he said. Like he said, I'm
Like-
staying at your house tonight.
Okay. Well,
Come on, let's
let's
be
put it
creative.
like this, I'm not Jesus. I do stand as person at certain points, but I'm not actually him.
Back in the 50s, my wife's dad's, when he was a kid, in Quebec,
Mhm.
that's where they're from. The parish priest would knock on every door
Mhm.
and say, are you pregnant? If not, why aren't you pregnant?
No.
Because they call it,
Too bad.
No.
well, I'm just saying, like.
Yeah,
that's
right,
how
right,
they
yeah.
speak, but they
Yeah.
called it the revenge of the cradle, but it was in French, because they were gonna outpopulate the British. That was their, so that's why.
Get back to the British, that's all.
So it wasn't, you know, all
10
about
10
the,
plus kids was super common in Quebec, up until pretty recently.
Again, we do have an organization that is directed towards that evangelization. And we can say, well, is it really working well? I don't know. I mean, so yeah, there's always better ways and worse ways we can do evangelization and really kind of reach out to people and do that. You're right. That's
that would
true.
not be a good idea.
Not
Well, not that.
not the
No,
why
no,
are you pregnant thing, but knocking on the door.
Right.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I think you could really, of course, it would take tons of time,
Mm,
go door to door, but you could really get people back. I
Right.
think. Like,
and that might
if my
be.
father's standing before me, I can't say no.
Mm,
A lot of people would say yes.
maybe.
Well,
I
and
really think.
that was another, you had those enforcers in my day, because if your parent didn't bring you to 8:30 mass, you better be there and sit with the nuns. And my
Well,
dad brought us,
And I think this is getting at another perspective that kind of is coming in, and I think it's really prevalent in the church. There isn't as much respect for clergy as there used to be. And so at that point,
Yeah.
you're right, there may be some that be, oh, Father's here, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, great, whatever. There's some probably would, I think the majority would rather slam the door in my face. And this is not to be,
Registered.
this is not to be pessimistic or not to like look at this negatively, because I think there's a lot of, I've found a great joy in beauty in my priesthood, and I think there's also a great effect of the Holy Spirit and the fact that we are here when people need us. But that typically is the response that people have today, is we're there when they need us, otherwise leave me alone.
And you're talking about actual like registered parishioners?
I'm talking about people in general,
Oh, people in general.
but I mean, that does include registered parishioners.
Well,
So like, for instance, families will call us at the rectory here when mom or dad are in the hospital, mom and dad are dying, mom and dad need last rites. Now, what they don't recognize is you should have called us probably weeks ago when mom and dad first went to the hospital. Mom and dad first feeling sick. But what they want is there's a recognition that there's a grace there in the presence of the priest that can be brought. But otherwise, we don't need you, Father. Thank you, but we're good. Right. Part of that could be fear of mortality. I don't know. But I do find the majority of people that I visit are people I don't know.
mhm.
And I'm visiting there because they need something right then and there.
Mhm.
Now, could you say that because of that visit that sort of starts to maybe plant a seed? Maybe. And is that germinating? I don't know. I don't see it yet. And I might never see it.
Mhm.
And that's something that every priest and every person in ministry has to understand.
Mhm. Yeah, it was very different, and I always said I wasn't gonna be the person who said that, but when I was a kid, well, the church, all the masses were full.
Mhm.
And we went with my dad. Mom stayed home with the baby, because she's very cooperative about being pregnant. And I mean, all of our classmates were there. And it was full, 8:30 mass. Mom went to 7. And but the nuns really did have a lot of clout.
Mhm.
And I don't know,
But
it's just,
well, this also, I mean, not even harp on this anymore, but there's another factor I think that needs to be brought into this conversation and really concerned, and this is something that I have to deal with all the time. I think back when I was a kid, if father did show up at the door, be like, oh, he probably would have been welcomed in. But, oh, father, thanks for coming. What are you doing here? Can we do something for you? Whatever. That all changed, I think, in the early 2000s.
Yeah, the sex scandal.
And so now just showing up at someone's door. The perfect example of this. There's a family, when I first got here, there's a family in the parish who moved out of the parish a while back. They lived very close to the rectory here. And they were known to have young clergy come to their house on a regular, almost weekly basis. And the first time I was here, I got invited and I went over. And this was still when one of the previous associates was still here. And they showed me that there was a clergy door, which was a door that the clergy could use and come into the house and do whatever. And so
Of their own.
home.
Interesting.
To which point, the first time I saw that, I said to myself,
like
I'm never doing
side
this again.
door?
It was
or-
a back door basically from the
Oh.
alley. Now,
Oh.
here's the thing. When I first used it, I told myself I'm never doing this again. Right? Because that is not a good look. In the same
No.
way that it's not a good look and like to maybe come to the front house and these are the scenarios I think about now, and it's sad. But what if I came to the door and the parents weren't there and the kids were, and I mean I'd have to leave immediately, I wouldn't be able to go in. But
Yeah.
also, what if an accusation arises from that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it didn't just happen in the last several decades, it's probably been going on for 2,000 years. But, oh, my mother, this was so painful for her. She said, "But what about rabbis and what about ministers?" I said, I thought could possibly be a mortal sin for the church was the bishops moving people around, because there are going to be molesters in every phase of life.
Yeah.
And, but we didn't know back then. I did. I was taking seminars. I was a CASA volunteer. I said, yeah, if you were in charge of,
Kids.
thousands of
Yeah,
school kids,
right.
the bishop would have read the same books, but I don't know, it's.
Well, and at that point too, I mean, I think the other thing that's kind of going again to how the church is critiqued. Yeah, you can say it's been around for thousands. I don't think it was as prevalent in the last, over the last century, just because I think there were certain factors that came into play that probably made it more prevalent. But even so, if you're looking compared to the general population, it still was a smaller number comparatively.
Yeah, and.
But the other, to the point of the bishop, and this is why I never become a bishop. I think a lot of bishops were relying on expertise in many ways of particular doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, who say, we can take this person and mold them. And that compared to a time frame when the priest population was decreasing, the number of Catholics weren't really going down. As a bishop, you're looking at this and saying, okay, well, I could potentially send this guy to rehab. Maybe he'll come back fine. I'll listen to my doctor. But I think that's why bishops were, now not all, granted, but I think some bishops were looking at that and said, okay, well, they're saying they got a clean bill of health. I need a body over in this parish.
Yeah. It absolutely never happens, ever, unless they do some kind of chemical.
Oh, right, yeah, right.
But
Right.
no, a
Yeah.
molester is
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
going to.
Oh, yeah. I think.
And
Yeah.
but no, you don't need that body.
Mhm.
And not even warning. But I mean, there's always going to be.
Well, I'm not saying that what they were. I can understand that a bishop in a goodwill would say, okay, well, I'm being told by this person that they can rehabilitate this guy and treat him and even cure him maybe. I'm going to be willing to give him a shot and see what happens there, because I want to first approach him with charity and this person with charity. And if this person tells me that they're okay, then I'm going to then put them in the ministry, maybe work them up a little. I don't know. There's ways you can do that, but I think that's the thing. I can understand a bishop in that perspective saying, okay, well, maybe we can try this and see what it works. You're right.
Child's life.
Well, granted, no, I'm not saying it was right, Chris. What I'm saying is I can understand that perspective. And so I think I could be, and again, I think I could be a little bit more forgiving in that respect, because I never experienced that personally. I never experienced that happen to me as far as that was concerned. The closest I ever came was at one point we had an associate in our parish who was removed from active ministry later on because of an accusation, and it was determined to be a credible accusation. So there's a difference between credible accusation and substantial accusation.
Yeah.
Apparently, I didn't find this out till later, but the circumstance of this particular priest was, this was 70s, 80s. There was a single mother in the parish that had 3 boys. The single mother was looking for some babysitting help, came to father and said, "Father, can you watch my boys while I go to work tonight?" He said, "Okay." In the concept of doing this, he found out that the middle child was being bullied. And so father had some experience with wrestling in high school, taught the kids some moves. And of course, with wrestling moves, you tend to put hands where maybe it wouldn't be appropriate. And that became the accusation.
Yeah, it is. It's very dangerous.
And he was able to be in active ministry the rest of his life after that.
He wasn't able to be, yeah, so.
No.
Yeah.
And someone I know who I know for sure was a child molester. I was told by his daughter that DFS, Department of Family Services, had said, no, he wasn't. I said, that's a lie. They absolutely never can say that. They just can't, they cannot ever say that. And, I mean, it's such a tragedy because, you know, everybody walks around in a collar.
Right.
That, Father Chris Alar, who I told you does a lot of lectures, he said that he's been tackled in the airport. And, you know, it just makes it miserable for everyone. And, I don't
One
know.
of my classmates was he was studying in Rome, and part of the Romani, they get to go to over the summers, over Christmas breaks, get to travel a lot and go to different places, church, and do some apostolics, that kind of thing. And he had the opportunity to go to Ireland for a week or two, and he went there and he got to Ireland, and he was wearing his collar seminary, and they told him, no, don't wear that around. So why not? I was like, well, just don't wear it around. So he said, well, no, I'm going to evangelize. I'm going to show people, what, this is identity. So he went around and started getting spat upon.
Yeah.
Didn't know who he was, just he saw the collar.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the men suffered from this and they were put in these positions where they could take advantage. Obviously, that's tragic. And it's also sad that men who don't experience this being treated this way.
Yeah.
I think it'll take 3 generations.
It'll take a while.
Essentially for the early 2000s to be out of living memory before, unsympathetic, non-religious people can stop associating priests with that. It's gonna take.
Well, and
Because basically, we're all just gonna have to be dead and
the
our
jokes,
grandchildren.
they're just painful.
Yeah.
I don't mind the jokes personally. I'm like, whatever.
Oh, I do.
Other jokes, whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but.
What I mind is the actions against and the violence against priests because of it. It's the whole, well, a few bad apples spoil the whole bunch. That's kind of what the approach is for a lot of people.
Yeah,
So-
but then you can't, people have to be on guard. You even said something about parents telling children not to go into buildings.
Yeah, we were talking about there's kind of seems to be an intellectual dissonance in children when they come up here to play basketball during lessons, but they don't come into church.
Yeah.
And so I said it's possible maybe parents are telling their children don't go into buildings alone.
Well, they can come in because it's filled with old ladies.
But who says you can trust them?
You can trust them.
So I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, it's painful. I think it's still, and when I think about my poor mother, because she would make excuses, just like she would make excuses, well, we didn't know smoking was so bad. I said, well, it was bad for your draperies. Why wouldn't it be bad for your lungs?
Yeah.
So it is, it's really, really hard.
I mean, fair too. I think there is a development of understanding. I mean, obviously you could say, well, how could you not necessarily know this? Well, sometimes it takes steps to get to that point. I think we see it all throughout history, which is why we can't go back and judge prior generations based on what we know today, because, well, that's not really fair to them, I think we can definitely take that approach for a lot of things. So, but yeah, I think we just have to rejoice and know what we know now and live our lives accordingly, and then, try to drive forward in our understanding of virtue and what God wants for us. That's all we really can do.
Yeah. I was a volunteer at our little haven. It's an orphanage. Well, they don't call it an orphanage, but it's an orphanage. And they had very strict rules about touching the kids. Well, I was in the baby house with 2 and 3-year-olds. And I mostly didn't pay much attention to that. I mean, we embraced them
Sure.
and things like that. But, some of them had been molested already. And, they had, well, this I think might have more to do with them starting as an AIDS house. But to diaper a baby, you had to mask and wear gloves. Well, I was not gonna touch a baby's skin with latex. So I didn't do that.
So does that mean,
either.
does that mean that there's like 6-year-old kids living there who are never hugged by anyone?
Yeah, they hug them, but you know, you can't let them sit on your lap all afternoon.
Right. So it's like, I mean.
Or during the whole
Even
trek.
with, yeah, even like with protecting our children, like. If, let's say I'm on the playground with the adults present, right, if a kid runs up to me and gives me a hug, I'm not gonna like, hey, get away, you know. But
Yeah,
I don't like wink, it's just, okay, and then you let them go, I mean, so there are proper ways of doing that.
yeah.
That is in line with, but the whole point is that everything has to be above board.
Sure.
And a molested child will act out sexually,
Right,
even if they don't know
Yeah.
anything about it.
Yeah.
They, they will do things that, and to other children, you have to
Mhm.
kind of watch that they're not inappropriate, and you wouldn't think 2-3-year-olds could be inappropriate.
I mean,
but-
and this is, I don't know, but there's a 6th grader who every time she says, "Father, I love your eyebrows." And I'm like, I said, I don't know how to respond to that. Thank you, I guess. That's kind of a weird thing to say, but I'll let it go at that, right? I just walk away. And so part of that is, again, there's ways you respond, just like you don't necessarily, because like some degrees, they don't even know what they're saying.
Well, and
So it's
she
like-
might have said it
To see-
spontaneously once, and now she
Right.
does it to Dee,
Exactly right. And she does. I know that's what you do now.
because you're blushing.
Well, it was just like, all right. Well, it was just hit me like, I don't know what you mean by that. Thank you. I mean, that's what it was like, all right, and then you just kind of move on. But then see, that's what I'm saying. It's like it's like saying I really like your earlobes. I don't know what
Yeah.
whatever.
Oddly specific.
Exactly. And so you just kind of let it go. And but certain ages they may start say things they don't even know what they're saying.
No, or they don't,
They're like
certainly-
trying out
yeah.
language.
Yeah,
as they're learning
right.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Even
you've
in
got a
classroom.
lot of euphemisms.
Even in
Yeah.
classrooms,
Pretty
like
soon.
someone will say like, "What'd you say? Like, you know what that means?" No, okay. Watch your practice. All right, there you go. We'll go move on. All right, yeah, all right. Good. Well, any other questions? Let's see here. What time we got?
Oh, I've got a notebook full, so I will come
Save-
back
save
again.
it for the next time.
Okay.
We didn't
You
even
look
get.
dressed up.
I mean, if we want, so we can end now if we want. If not, we can keep on going. So if you got any.
I am curious about this one.
Yeah.
So in the next 10 years or so, we are going to reach the 2000th anniversary of Jesus's death and resurrection. I don't know if there's a specific year that the Catholic Church is planning for a mega celebration. Have you heard about this, or is it secret?
No.
Because it seems like a very significant milestone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at it from that perspective, I mean, we're the
The second millennium.
third. Well, we're right on the third millennium since the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. When was that? That's kind of an open question. I mean, I would imagine the church might plan a jubilee year for the year 2033. Around that time, maybe.
That'd be cool. That'd be great.
I don't know.
We'll bring out Being Sisters for
Yeah,
that.
that's
There we go.
I think that's a more special occasion. They're mostly cloistered.
I know.
So yeah, I haven't heard anything specific.
Okay.
But yeah, I was thinking a few months ago. I was like, I was reading. I think I was watching a YouTube video about the birth of Jesus. They're trying to go through a timeline, and basically archaeologically speaking, there's kind of a time frame between like 6 BC through like 7 AD, where they're trying to figure out when that date was when the birth of Jesus, right? So
Well,
it was actually 0. Well, we have to understand there was a change in the calendars. We're talking about the lunar calendar compared to the solar calendar. And part of that's coming from scripture, because there's these references to particular people in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke that do overlap, but there also is sort of a different correspondence to when certain people were doing what they were doing in the Bible and when they weren't. So it's kind of an open question.
well, don't they have the date of the census? I mean, they.
Well, they
keep the
do,
records,
but
didn't they?
the problem with that is that
Or
it
is
comes
that
from the
over a
time
long
of
time?
Quirinius, which actually happened about 6 AD. Right, so 6 AD was, okay, well, that's when Quirinius was in Syria, That's also when Archelaus was the leader of, or Herod was still the leader of Judea. But that also conflicts with some of the Matthew's gospel, which says that Herod was in control, but also there was these other people that were in control of other areas that weren't at the time when Luke was saying. So the question is, well, who's right? And it could say, well, maybe they both are. Because I mean, the other thing too is, you know, the actual, what we hear in Luke and Matthew's gospel, we talk about this time frame between the Annunciation, which was then 9 months later his birth, but also this time frame of when the Magi actually came, and when the holy innocents were slaughtered, and when the presentation was, and when the flee into Egypt was. That's kind of an open question about the actual chronological order of those things. So we know, for instance, that 40 days after the birth of Jesus had to happen the presentation, and 8 days after the birth of Jesus would have to be his naming and his circumcision, because well, it was the Jewish rite. And Mary and Joseph were devout Jews, and they would have done that. But when the Magi came, well, why did Herod kill all children 2 years and younger? Well, that's when basically they ascertained when the star were out.
For peace to come, didn't they?
Was that
They had a long way to come, didn't they?
the Magi?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the thought is they're from the Magi from like Persia, India, and China. So, you know, you're going all the way through Asia, which on camel and on foot would take forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at these things and saying, well, you know, it's not necessarily a neat, tidy time frame. And so, when did Jesus actually die? Well, we know he started his ministry when he was about 30 years old, we're told in Scripture, and he died about 3 years later, based on the context we get in Scripture. So he was probably around 33 years old. But was that 33 AD, or was it like more like 40 AD? You know, who really knows? Or was it even 25 AD, right? So it's an open question.
I don't like, it seems like the date I see most of the time in history is like Jesus was born around 4 BC. That seems to be come
Sure.
which would mean
Yeah.
if he was 33, so that would be
But see, that would also
29.
conflict with Luke, because Quirinius, the year of the census was the year that Quirinius took leadership and governorship of Syria, and that happened about 6 AD. So that would have been 10 years before Quirinius actually was the governor of Syria.
Yeah.
And see, that's what I'm saying, is was there another Quirinius? I mean, the other thing you have to take into consideration too is, you know, a lot of the names in the Bible, people had multiple names based on what culture they were in, right? So Quirinius could have been, well, maybe he was actually this Greek guy. Who knows, right? So it's a good debate, it's a good discussion, but ultimately, all we really need to know is that he came, he died, he resurrected, he ascended, all for us. That's the whole gist. When that happened, we can talk about that, but you know, but yeah, as far as I don't know, there may be maybe in the 2030 year there'll be a jubilee. I don't know.
Well, like Chris was saying, don't miss an opportunity for a good spectacle.
That's right.
And if you've got some people who have Pepto-Bismol pink clothing, that's a spectacle.
True.
That's how, being good Catholic girls, that's how a friend of mine and I had just started my business downtown, and she worked for my partner, an engineering company. And I was very busy, and they had a deadline on drawings. They were an engineering company. And Mother Teresa's coming. Should we go? Should we not go? Should we go? My sister keeps calling me. Are you gonna go? Are you gonna go? She had a little Fox Photo downtown. I can't go. I can't leave. I can't leave the store. I can't leave the store. Well, at the very last minute, Cindy and I go flying. And of course, we're wearing high heels, and we've got a 9-block run to the garage. And we get there to the cathedral, and there is this dead end street with bushes, and we just plowed into the bushes
Oh, like on Maryland?
and hid the car.
Is it on Maryland?
It
Behind
was
the
a few blocks,
Oh, okay.
and we ran. Well, as we approach the cathedral, we see a whole line of little girls in communion dresses. Been there. done that. So we did not go to the balcony or thread our way through. We knew they were gonna process that poor lady through the vestibule. So we're standing there, and all I can think of is she had two little babies. One of them did projectile vomit a lot, so that wouldn't have been cool, but she would have reached out and touched those
Yeah.
babies. But we were close enough, we could have touched her, but you know, you wouldn't do that. She had worn holes in the elbows of her sweater, and she was just concentrating on those beads.
What year was this?
I don't know, 84, 85, something. But those communion dresses are a telltale sign. And so I get back to my office and I felt so bad for my sister. So I called her, she said, oh, I was there. I got a great picture of her. Mary was right smack in front of the altar with her big honking camera. I said, I hope you were supposed to say, take a picture. Beautiful picture of her. Yeah, she just took off too, and she said, I might get fired. I said,
Well, I mean, in the long run, is it worth the same but a saint, right? Or at least take a picture.
the air
Yeah.
in the place just changed.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was, and yeah, it was, apparently it was that way when the Pope, when John Paul.
I was down at the
Well,
Dome when I was down there with my sister for mass, and it was a different feel. It was a
Yeah.
different, it wasn't like a football game or like, there was something different about that.
Yeah,
That was like, okay, there's something happening here, you know.
yeah, but, and, you know, she was so tiny and,
Even in '84, I mean, she was always very tough, but yeah, that was.
oh, yeah, I mean, she looked very
Oh,
old,
yeah.
and I was much younger. I don't say very old as much as I used to. But, yeah, it was a thrill. It was such a thrill. And,
Yeah.
well, and then, Joe Shaughnessy, Father Shaughnessy's dad, who I worked for, BSI, the big contracting company, I was their first employee. Well, they had a big, when the Pope came, I'm sure he met, sure he did. They had a huge lawn party. And when I met him 5 years later, he said, why didn't you come to? I said, the only reason I knew you lived there is because my little brother had to work on the steeple of your house.
His house had a steeple.
It had well, not a steeple, but it had a pointed roof because I wrote a note to Joe, and I love that man, both of them, Bannis too. So I write him a note, and he writes a beautiful letter back to me. And he said, if I ever write a book, you are going to be in the first chapter. Because I went with them from the company they left, and I was their first employee. You are going to be in the first chapter. So we're at my brother's pool, and I show him the email. It was an email. He says, hey, what about me? How do you think my felt scooting down that peaked roof to get, there was a piece of wood that Joe wanted taken off and redone at the planing. What chapter do you think I'm gonna be in? I don't think you're gonna make the cut. But anyway,
Well, good, great.
long time ago.
All
Oh
right.
my goodness.
Well,
Overstayed our
unless there are
welcome.
any other questions, we can,
I better save it for the next.
okay, very good, all right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
gonna
cool.
keep filling mine over.
Very good. So our next meeting will be next week. The week after that, of course, Monsignor has his Bible study, so we'll be here for that week. But you can come to that Bible study. I encourage you guys to do that. Then the first week again, we'll start again with Friends, Food, and Faith. So that's gonna be a guiding
No.
topic.
That was the first one I came to. That was the one Marilyn was at.
Probably.
I
yeah.
didn't get any food.
Well, it was over there.
Oh, I didn't even see it.
Oh, yeah, I always bring food down.
I was late.
Is the,
So, huh?
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was actually kidding.
Is the Bible study a monthly thing?
Yeah, it's always this last Tuesday of the month. So
Last Tuesday.
the first Tuesday, Friends, Food and Faith, that's a guided topic that we discuss, have a topic, All the other Tuesdays are about the Father, except for the last Tuesday, which is the Bible study of Monsignor.
Is that a year-round thing?
I believe so. I think he's planning it year round.
Okay.
Right now, he's talking about it's the Bible study directed towards the social teaching of the church, which is, I think, very beneficial. So, I encourage you guys to participate as much as you can, and you're always welcome down here at 6:30, 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. We'll be down here every time.
Most definitely.
Okay, well, let's make the next faith, food and fun or.
Friends, Food, Faith.
Friends.
Well,
Faith.
the Father's next week.
Let's,
Don't worry about the Father.
okay,
Okay.
well, let's have everybody bring their ideas for that big processional across the Capitol.
Okay, great. That's gonna be our topic.
Maximum.
Maybe we can get Louis and Fredberg to come.
Wonderful. We'll figure it out.
Oh, my.
Yeah, okay, well, very good. So thanks for coming. Like Mickey already, she let us go here. That's good. And we'll see everyone next week, if not sooner.
Well, thank you. Now